and recovery team. So we have employment specialists embedded in the Peterborough locality team, the Cambridge, the Huntingdon, Fenland and Cameo. And then the new employment specialists are embedding into those CGL services in the same sites. Each employment specialist will hold a caseload of 20 to 25 clients, and we cap it at that because we think it's really important that caseloads don't get too big so that we can provide a real quality service. And our main purpose is to support people to find paid employment and also to support people who maybe need support to retain their job if they're at risk of losing their job or they're off work sick and they need to get help to get back into work. So a little bit of an overview of our kind of 8 principles. As I mentioned, we aim to get people into competitive employment. So we don't have any special supported jobs for anybody. Our clients are supported to apply for jobs and look for jobs like you or I would if we were looking for new work. And we don't tend to look at the voluntary work or training aspect of vocation unless there's a very clear end goal of employment at the end, or the training is specifically related to someone getting a job at the end of that bit of training. But on the whole, it's paid employment only. We are a zero exclusion service. So aside from someone having a diagnosed severe mental illness or presenting with complexity with their mental health, or open to the treatment pathway in CGL, we'll accept a referral. So we don't turn people away for any reason, such as being homeless or being in hospital or being under a crisis team. We really believe that employment is part of someone's recovery journey. We want to support someone as early as possible. So it's really easy to get our support. I guess the way we work differently than people going to the job centre for support is we support people to get jobs that they really want. We know if we end up in a job that we're enjoying, we're more likely to stay. So we do vocational profiling with people, find out what their interests are, what they're good at, what they don't like, and then help them find the job that they really want, not just, we're aware there's loads of jobs going in a particular place and asking people to apply. We also work really quickly, so rather than spending lots of time prepping people to be ready for work, we believe if we're there along the process, that if we can get people into work as quickly as possible and work with the employers, then we'd rather get people into work and support them longer term. So for instance, if once someone gets added to an employment specialist caseload, we are encouraging them to start applying for jobs within around 30 days. We know not everyone's ready for that, and we will work to the individual's pace. And we're not expecting people to be in work within 30 days, but it's starting to have those conversations with employers. As I mentioned, we're embedded into the clinical teams. That's massively important in terms of supporting job sustainment as well. So if someone's in work, then having a bit of a crisis with their mental health, we've got those really good links and communications with the MD team. And that means that we can hopefully support that person to stay in work, even if they're not doing so well with their mental health. We do a lot of employer engagement out across the county. So we think it's really important that we continue to break down the stigma around employing people that might have a mental health diagnosis. The more likely we are to have a good relationship with an employer, we can introduce candidates as they come onto our caseloads, so that we've built some excellent relationships across the county. And just one example, some of the colleges in Cambridge, we can introduce our clients, they'll give them work trials, and if all's well, they'll happily employ them. We also are a time unlimited service, which I find really refreshing these days, because I think some people often we're very worried they're only going to get a set amount of sessions. We don't put time limits on how long we'll support someone, and we also support people once they are in work for a period of time to make sure that period goes well. Of course, if someone's been on our caseload maybe 9 months and they haven't got work, we'd want to review those goals. And generally after around 4 or 5 months of in-work support, people are ready to be discharged, but we don't set time limits. And finally, we're very aware that a lot of people we support claim benefits. They're really worried about the impact of going back to work on their benefits. So we've developed really good relationships with the local DWP, who support people to understand what impact going back to work will have on their income. And then the final slide from me, just to let you know a little bit about our activity so far this year. So this is our kind of data from April up until the end of 2023. So far 270 people have accessed our mental health service. Of course, we haven't quite opened in drug and alcohol yet. So far 109 people have either gained a job or been able to retain their job. So our yearly target for the end of March this year is 97. So we're really pleased, we're well ahead of target. We do have some really lovely feedback when we use when we survey the people who've used our services via our Meridian. So 81.5% of people rate our service as excellent. And because IPS is an internationally recognised model, we have to go through something called fidelity reviews every 2 years to make sure we are aligning to the model. And we had our first ever review last year, and we're really pleased that we were rated as good. We scored 105 out of 125, so for our first review. We were really pleased with that, but we also awarded something called the Quality Kite Mark. So that means they were really impressed with how well our employment specialists embed within our clinical teams, and that we also have some really quality employer engagement going on throughout the county. So that is all my slides. I'm going to pass over to Carol now. So Carol's used our service. She's not with us anymore with IPS, but you're going to talk through a little bit about your experiences of the service. So over to Kate. If you can let me know if you can hear her, because she's sitting opposite me. I hope you can pick it up.
Morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Good morning. Hi. Just a bit about myself. One of my last jobs before I had a lot of trouble with my mental health was in a library. I took voluntary redundancy in 2013, and my mental health was starting to suffer. Then about 2018, a friend got me work as an invigilator at one of the local schools. It was quite a small team, and it was quite nice to start with, although I got some stress issues and had a few issues with certain personnel. So before lockdown, I'd left that job. And so we got to 2020. I had a social worker who at the time thought I should move on from my assisted living, which upset me. And then I actually lost my funding for my support worker. So I was in a bit of a rough place. And of course, we had lockdown looming, but kindly they had suggested to me IPS, put me in touch with Mark from the team here. And from that very first phone call, someone I knew was sort of switched on, was interested in what I'd done in the past, the things that I was able to do, things that I wanted to do. So that was quite encouraging. And even with lockdown, we found ways of meeting, walking around a park, talking about what I'd like to do. And even at the time, I think Mark had more faith in me than I had in myself. I just sort of blinkered thinking I can't see a way of getting back into work, certainly, especially with lockdown. And once we could meet up, Mark was very helpful with regarding to putting a CV together, something I hadn't done for ages. So it was helpful with the clerical side of things, and always on the lookout for things that I wanted to do. I had a bit of a background in customer services, and Mark found a job that I would never have found. He found me an interview at the cathedral to work with the voluntary people, a paid job working with the volunteers at the cathedral. And even before the interview, he was helping me. We were talking about what I should look at, what things I could perhaps go to the library, get some books, find a little bit about the cathedral. And even on the day of the interview, I remember thinking, do I get up? Do I want to go to this interview? But when I got there, I really enjoyed it. The chap there, he used to work for Thomas Cook's, who were a big employer in the city, and someone that I used to work for. So we had a common ground, me and the interviewer. And the interview went well. And they rang me back and said, look, you haven't got the job, but they were impressed. They thought, that maybe I could do voluntary work for them, but it gave me the courage to go for something else. And one thing that came up was another school, a local school to me that I could walk to, invigilating. So I went for the interview and I got the job there. Now, I personally didn't want them to know my mental health issues, because I thought possibly being a school and knowing the job, they might think they might have gone against me. So I didn't actually let them know, but Mark was there as a sounding board. I think the Thursday I went in, it went dreadfully. There was a bit of a chaos at the end of the exam, and I felt really awful. And I could voice that to Mark. I could say to him, oh goodness, this, this happened, and I don't feel very confident. But he was there saying, give it another try and talk to the people. So he was there as my sounding board. He was there to encourage me. But also, obviously, that's just a part-time, turn-time job. So we were still looking at other things. And one thing that I've always been interested in, I like drama. I've had the idea I could get involved with murder mysteries, because someone I was friends with on Facebook, he'd done that and he was quite encouraging. But of course, COVID put an end to that. And it also put an end to a course I was going to do in Wisbech, a drama course, but that got cancelled. But I found a thing for murder mystery, and Mark was so encouraging. It's something he'd never come across before. And he said, yes, give it a go. And it was very encouraging for that. And I did get a job with the murder mystery, and it's something I do fairly regularly. It's certainly really taking off. But Mark was there when I wasn't sure about benefits. He was there to advise me on benefits, and very encouraging. And that's the lovely thing about IPS. They don't just say, here's a job, go and do it. They look at what you can do, what you want to do, and they look for that. So yeah, it's been an excellent service. I'm really, really happy with it. I'm even asking IPS to come to a coffee and bullet group that I go to and talk to my friends. I have other friends with mental health issues, and to talk to them about the service, maybe even offer it, even if they don't have it, they might know somebody else who would like to access it. So it's a great service, easy to access. And we do have so when you step down, when you have a discharge plan, you sit and you talk about it, you talk about what you've achieved. But I know that if I did get bad, I can self-refer again. So very, very happy with it, and just wonderful people.
Carol, thank you so much. What fantastic story you've told, and it's so impressive about the way that Mark in particular has helped you to get the confidence to live a good life, a happier life, I hope.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Ellie,
sorry, if I can just add as well that with my experience, I sit now on interview panels with Ellie and the other staff, and I think it's nice for me because it's give me a bit of confidence, a bit more experience. But also, if people, they might not know, if they're coming fairly new to IPS and CPFT, they can ask me questions that I can, answer, or just bring up that one little thing that perhaps other people wouldn't be able to add to the interview panel.
That's absolutely brilliant. So you're giving back and supporting others as well. Ellie or Anna, is there anything else you'd like to add? Because that's the most fantastic, exposition of all that is good about the work that you're doing. But anything that you'd like to add, Anna? Were you poised to jump in?
No, I was just going to say, I think Carol has summed it up really succinctly about the impact that these services have on individuals and their lives, and also how that feeds back into the organisation in terms of reducing admissions and the such like.
Fantastic. And Ellie, anything else at all from you?
Just to add, we're really lucky that we're going to get some IPS ring-fence funding over the next 5 years, so the service will be expanding. We are able to expand out into primary care, still for severe mental illness. So I'm really excited that we'll be able to, because we do get lots of questions from other services about whether they can refer. So I really hope we'll be able to expand out to other areas over the next few years.
That is absolutely brilliant to hear. We've consumed a lot of time, but quite rightly, because it is just such important work, and I'd love to come and find out more about it. I'm particularly pleased that you've got good relationships with the DWP and employers, so that's brilliant. But I suspect there's ever more to do. But I'm just going to open up to anybody in the room who's got a point or a question. Pri?
I'm conscious of time, so sorry, I'm Pri, I'm one of the non-execs. First of all, thank you. That was a really inspiring presentation for both of you. Carol, I think what was lovely was when you said that it was nice that somebody had faith in you. So it's not really a question, but more of it's nice that that actually helped you in terms of your well-being and how you felt about yourself. Ellie, I had two questions, but one you've answered, which is what would you do if there were more resources? The other one is just curious, have you had any interesting feedback or challenges from employers at all? Or are they broadly always supportive of what you're doing?
Yeah, interesting question. It varies, but on the whole, and certainly since lockdown, employers have been a lot more open to talking about the mental health challenges of their workforce. And we very much go in not just trying to find a job or a vacancy, but look at ways of them being able to support their workforce and places they can signpost to. But we very much find if we find a good employer, then the people that they end up employing are likely to stay there for a long time and be very happy. We have some quite high targets about how many employers we speak to per week. So each full-time member of staff is expected to have 6 conversations with an employer a week. So you can imagine some of those people just say, oh, sorry, we're not interested, or we're not recruiting at the moment. We've had very few negatives. And if we do get a negative, I think we just have to say, you know what, we don't want to work with that employer. If they're going to react like that to us, we don't want to support our clients to work for that employer.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Anybody else before we? Well, Joe, do you want to come in? It's going to have to be very quick.
Yeah, I'll make it very quick. Lots of thanks. Good morning, everyone. Is the service available to people on our waiting lists, or do you have to be in treatment? Thank you.
Someone can be on a waiting list. They just have, at the moment, they'd have to be open to one of the locality teams or Cameo. But we do take people who are on waiting lists and not currently in treatment.
Thank you very much.
Well, look, thank you all, Carol in particular, for coming and telling your story, because it helps to bring to life the impact we want to have for the people that we serve. So thank you so much for doing that. I'd love to come and meet the team, so I'll make a priority to do that. That'd be brilliant. Thank you ever so much. It's been a brilliant start to the meeting. Thank you. So you, if anybody's watching the room here in Fulbourn, you'll see that people are coming in. Some of them exhausted by doing battle with the traffic around Cambridge. You'll probably see a bit more of that going on, but we're going to push on into the main body of the meeting. Caroline, I'm looking to you to see if we've got any apologies today.
Apologies noted by Anna Hills, our Chief Executive, and Penny Snowden, Chief Nurse.
Thank you very much. And I ask this every time, but you never know. Has anybody on the board discovered a new declaration of interest to make since we last met? Fabulous. And I've not been notified of any other business, but Caroline?
No.
Nothing. Okay. So in which case, could we go to the minutes of the last meeting? Feels like a long time ago now, at the back end of November. But let's just go through for accuracy on page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. Excellent. So no items of accuracy, so thank you for a good minute. Is there anything arising out of that meeting that isn't covered elsewhere today? In which case we can accept the minutes. Brilliant. And then in terms of the action log, there is one item on the action log which we're going to cover today, which is open, which is Debbie's going to be giving us a very helpful presentation on the work we're doing on waiting lists. So we will get to that in due course. Let me go to then my update. I'll take as read what's in the written report. I want to begin by but noting with great sadness that during the Christmas and early New Year period, 3 members of our staff passed away from ill health. All organisations could feel as if there's an element of family about them, and we know that colleagues have been grieving for good colleagues that they've lost and supporting each other. And we would want to know how much we regret losing any colleague in such tragic circumstances. So we remember them and their families and the colleagues who are mourning them at this particular moment in time. Also want to note positively, and Kathy was there, I was unable to be there yesterday. There was a celebration of the Children's Hospital meeting its latest progress step en route to getting out of the ground and being able to better serve our children and young people. So I think we'd want to congratulate everybody involved in this, and we will be talking much more about it in the months to come and the years to come as we move to see the Children's Hospital coming into life. We will do this probably a number of times during the course of this meeting, but we wanted to, thank all of our staff for the immense amount of hard work and commitment that they are showing at the moment. This is always a tremendously busy time of the year. The third week of January, I believe, statistically, is always the busiest week in the NHS across all parts, and we are no different this year. It's been prefaced by a period of industrial action, and it's been great to see the way in which colleagues have pulled together, made really huge efforts to make sure that we continue to offer our services with the high levels of safety and effectiveness that we do. And indeed, the way in which we pulled together to support our partners, particularly in acute hospitals, to be able to discharge patients into some of our care, whether it be at home or in some of our rehabilitation facilities. So thank you to everybody who's been involved there. We met last week, a couple of meetings, part of our governance, where we were doing some important things to note, which is that it's a legal requirement that we have a senior independent director, and currently that's a role that's brilliantly discharged by Jeff, who will be leaving us at the end of March. And when Jeff leaves us, Karen, who is one of our other long-standing NEDs, is taking over from him. So thank you. Baton almost passed, but not quite. And some of you will be aware, we reported a number of times about the process of replacing Jeff and filling other vacancies that we have, so that we are now able to announce that Jane Cannon, who's had to leave the room to cough, that Jane, who many of you know, has been appointed as a NED, and her role is to replace Jeff. And that Jackie, who is in the room, Jackie McGecky, will be joining us as the Associate NED, focusing particularly on people and culture, working alongside Pri. And Jackie, you are very welcome to our family here at CPFT. We are currently out to market for a clinical NED and also an Associate NED focusing on projects and infrastructure that will include the Children's Hospital. And I'm delighted to say that the interest in those roles is really strong, and we will look forward again to making those appointments, I hope, over the springtime. We also have talked about and have taken papers on something called the CARC review, which is focusing on the fit and proper person requirements, legal requirements across the NHS. And we're moving to make sure that in the absence of specific guidance as yet from either NHS England or the CQC, that we are really seizing the recommendations of CARC. And one of those will be around way in which we undertake DBS checks to assure you that we do undertake DBS checks for executives and non-executives. We're going to be extending that out now into our governing body, and we'll be engaging with governors and supporting governors to make sure that there are DBS checks in place also for that community. This is going to be an evolving picture. CARC reported last year, I think, Stephen, I'm looking.
Well, yes, formally last year the recommendations came out. Review started in 2018, working for it.
So it's been the work of a while, and as yet we don't have a full suite of specific requirements from those who oversee us, but we're trying to get in front of it, which feels like the right thing to do. So that, I think, concludes what I would want to focus on. John, who's covering from Anna, is delayed. So I'm going to propose that we will come back to his update and also the board assurance framework, which he's going to introduce once he arrives. And Karen, if it's okay with you, we'll move to the quality report. If you've drawn breath from doing battle with the A14. Yeah. Excellent. Let me hand over to you, Karen.
Okay, thank you, and apologies for being late. I will take the report as read, which covered the November and December meeting, and you can see from page 2 the assurance levels that the committee gave to the various items. There's just a couple I want to comment on, then happy to take questions. First is regarding the safeguarding team. Obviously, they are in place now, which has been a good development for the trust, and they are definitely getting to grips with the work that's out there and keeping on top of it, notwithstanding the increase in demand that has been high in all areas of the trust. I have to comment on the uncoupling of the 2 local authorities, which is causing difficulty as anticipated. As of the December meeting, an agreed protocol was still not in place as to how, as a trust, we're going to work with effectively 2 bodies. The ICB has asked for requested a business proposal for the required support to manage the increased demand on the MASH health provision, which has been submitted and was currently under consideration. I'll also update on the environmental ligature update. We've got a forum in place that is monitoring systems and processes relating to ligature reduction across the trust and referencing to ensure that the capital spend is prioritised appropriately. And the work that the team are doing there, and that includes their mental health, that includes the safety teams, the ward managers and the modelling matrix to continually review and assess ligature risks within their area, within their wards. Action plan is then formulated to clearly outline the mitigation that is required to make the ward safe. And the oversight is managed by the health and safety team and the estates teams. The other that we've seen that review of suicide, which I'm sure Cathy will provide Cathy to bring more up to date on that. An external chair has been appointed. My understanding is work will commence in February 2024, beginning of February, and the final terms of reference will be signed off via the normal governance processes. The other thing I want to comment on is the patient safety engagement strategy, and with that, I'll pull in performance around complaints. There's still work to be done there. I had a long conversation with Hannah Took last week, and whilst we are pulling in, assessing and collating data, there is still areas of the organisation where our performance in that area is not as good as we would want it to be. And I will be picking that up with Anna at my meeting on Friday. However, the Q2 shows that the area of good work by staff and many examples of positive feedback, notwithstanding, there is still work to be done, and I will start from there.
Thank you very much, Karen. Looking around the room, see if there's any questions at all. Aaron?
Shall I invite Cathy in just to give us an update?
Yes, so the thematic suicide review. So the recent delay, I suppose, has been around the procurement exercise. I'm very pleased to say we've now undertaken that, and we have appointed a company called Better Tomorrow, who are linked to Aqua, who are very well known in the health sector, and they are due to start with us on the 1st of February. We have a chair who we have had initial discussions with, who is very keen, but we haven't formally had anything with that chair yet, so I can't really reveal their name today. But this person, who I'm quite sure we will be appointing, has got a lot of experience. Previous medical director, and they've actually won awards for their work around suicide prevention and learning from death. So that's very positive. The terms of reference, we've had draft terms of reference for some time. But what we want is to work with Better Tomorrow when they come in to make sure that they are happy, and they will obviously be wanting to engage with families and patients as well, to make sure that they are exactly as they should be.
Thank you, Kathy. This is a really important piece of work, as we've said before, the CPFT, but also in terms of the learning that we can share more widely. And I said, I know that nationally there is an appetite to learn from this work, so we will look forward to it reporting. Thank you. Poonam, are you okay to pick up?
Sure. So I'll be talking to the quality report. I will take that report as read. The first thing I wanted to highlight was that the report outlines the proposed transition to PSERF on the 1st of January, which we have achieved alongside the rest of the system. We're making good progress with embracing the new ways of looking at from incidents. So there is a growing culture of challenging old beliefs and processes in a collaborative way, which is very much in the spirit of PSERF. We are continuing to embed the use of force recording via System 1, and our quality matrons within the clinical directorates are receiving that monthly data and supporting staff to promote the use of completing the appropriate templates. And that transition will provide us with that richer data and supports the work from a PCREF perspective as well. The number of incidents on the physical violence, in particular patients to staff, there is an increase there on the report. That has resulted in the reinstatement of the violence and aggression meetings held by the patient safety, clinical and health and safety team in collaboration. So that's a positive kind of response to that. I also want to highlight the new pressure ulcer national guidance that has been launched. And again, that outlines the revised categories for recording pressure ulcers. So there's been some reconfiguration work on Datex to ensure that the recording aligns with the new requirements of the national pressure ulcer categorisation. And our patient safety specialist is doing some close work with our frontline staff around liaising and educating them, and already there's been some positive feedback received regarding those changes. I mean, Karen, you've already mentioned complaints. Just want to say that there has been a small reduction in the informal complaints, which have been resolved within 10 working days, and that is in line with the complexity of those informal complaints that PALs are receiving. We're seeing the average response time of 48 working days, and that, again, disruption, which I think is noted in the report, is to do with some staff absences. That was very much short term, and it has had an impact on the promptness of those responses. But we are seeing a stabilisation of those numbers of complaints per month, and this was following that spike over the summer periods, if you remember. So 28 complaints were closed in November, and just to highlight, a further 12 have been closed in December. So the complaint numbers are now looking at to kind of steady. There's a steady rate of those complaints. So we're hoping to see an improved performance in the coming months. But Karen, like you say, you're meeting with Anna this Friday to sort of continue with the conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Poonam. I don't know if you're able to talk to it, I'm sorry, but in the papers, I know Anna's doing a lot of work on this, we have got some work through a patient experience improvement group that's just begun. I don't know if you're able to talk to that.
Yeah, no, I've had a conversation with Anna around the group and kind of the objectives around it too. So it's essentially the focus is very much around reviewing the patient experience process. So not only from the questionnaire point of view, but also the data collation and making it a little bit more up to date when it comes to digitalising the way in which patient experience is completed. So the objectives are very much around reviewing and implementing the patient experience strategy, recognising that there is that potential to improve the patient experience through that digital application. So they are looking to explore SMS messaging, touch points, QR codes, and opening the options to ensure that there are a variety of methods and that it's accessible to all. There's also going to be further work around the clinical staff, patients and carers, so focusing on those key questions within the questionnaires. Currently, there are 25 questions that we ask within that questionnaire, but we are looking to reduce that down to 15, just again, so it is, I suppose it will keep the service user engaged. And yeah, the focus as well is around optimization of that data collation to make that process slicker. To be honest with you, currently the tool that we use makes it more of a manual process. So again, this working group will be targeting and focusing on how best we can use that from a digital perspective.
Really helpful. I suppose the link I would make coming on from talking about complaints is, of course, complaints offers a rich seam of data, lived experience about things that we could be better at. So actually drawing that in and having a sense that there is a, there's route to learning in almost everything we do, and particularly if something goes wrong and how that impacts on how people experience us. So if we can make sure that we're making a virtue out of that. We don't want to create conditions where people complain, but we want to get the most value out of when people raise a concern with us to make sure that we're addressing it and improving. Thank you so much, Poonam. Any questions at all for Poonam? I'm going to just go back in the agenda then, John. John, you're very welcome. You too have had a horrible journey this morning. After the meeting, we're going to have a little sweepstakes, see who had the very worst journey. And I'm going to say mine was the worst right now. So John, I'm going to invite you to give us the acting chief exec's report and also the board assurance framework, and then we'll come back into the quality item, picking up with you, Kathy and George. Okay, so John, over to you.
Thanks, Eileen. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for being so late. The company helicopter is on order after this morning, but good to see you all. So just a few items I'll draw from this report if I can. Again, I'll take it as read, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of positives if I could, actually, over the sort of Christmas, New Year period. Industrial action, we saw the second period of industrial action at the beginning of January. That was the longest in NHS history, 6 days for the junior doctors. I just wanted to say a huge thanks to all our staff that were involved in the planning that operation and its implementation. It's notable, I think, it did run smoothly for us, and it was a very difficult period. It did run smoothly. No significant escalation of concerns from our clinical teams during that period. And it is a massive amount of work. And I think even about the EPRR teams who are running meetings early mornings, late at night, there's real significant.
I just want to say what EPRR is.
Sorry. Emergency Preparedness, Resilience and Response Team, forgive me, shorthand EPRR. But a team of people are hugely dedicated to what we needed to do, kept us all in order, I think it's fair to say, Kathy, and managed it really well. So I did just want to highlight the work that they've done. Also our clinical teams and operational teams in particular around the contribution they've been making to the system around managing winter pressures. Significant increases in capacity within our organisation over that period, and we continue to be in discussion about how we keep that going, and not just this kind of, which is traditional actually in winter, that kind of stop-start approach. As things ease, it takes off, and it's really important, I think, and the contribution that we can make as a mental health and community provider to other organisations in the system. We're still very much in the midst of winter, even though it's quite mild today. And still significant pressures through the acute hospitals, but at least the capacity we've been looking at, in particular around supporting people back to home and taking care of them at home, but also additional capacity we've opened up on the Cambridgeshire Rehabilitation Unit on the East Wing. 2 additional beds have opened during January, and there are plans to now open those beds further. I would see Debbie wants to.
They're all open.
They are all open. Fantastic. That's great.
Yeah. Well done for everybody involved in that. That has been big.
Fantastic. Oh, that's really good. Thanks, Debbie. So yeah, full capacity in the CRU, that makes such a difference to supporting discharges out of the acute hospitals as well. So yeah, really positive, a couple of positives really to start with. Out of area placements still remain a significant area of focus for us. Clearly we've opened now the 6 beds within Mulberry 3 ward, and we're beginning planning now for how we can open up additional capacity on Mulberry 3, up to a maximum, I'm looking at Debbie again, of 10, I think. The
next step will be taking it to 10.
Yeah.
We'll stay with male patients for now, but we're
yeah.
looking at 10.
Thanks. And just a reminder, not open to direct admissions. This is transfers principally out of Mulberry 1 and 2. But the planning is in full flow now in terms of the obvious issue, both in quality terms and financial terms, of having people out of areas. So very much thinking about how we draw people back. And while the numbers are variable on a daily basis, actually, at the time of writing, we had 22 inappropriate out of area placements. I think it's about 6 that were appropriate. And again, those numbers do move, but certainly opening Mulberry 3 has made a significant difference. Clearly, we need to think about recruitment into those roles so that we can open up the additional capacity, but there's a significant piece of work underway at the moment around flow to try and manage the flow through our system, through the CPFT beds, inpatient beds, to have an impact, as I say, on those out of area placements, and plan to keep the board fully informed in terms of the plans as they come to fruition. Now, on financial planning, I won't say a significant amount here because I know Lauren, we've spoken, is planning to cover some of the majority of this and the detail of this in her finance report later in the agenda. But I did just want to make a couple of points, if I may. We've set in process now what we're terming a financial recovery group for the organisation. And that group is an overseeing group. If you put it in terms of a command structure, it will be operating as a gold command group. And there are supporting groups underneath that, which are supported from members of our clinical, operational and corporate teams as well. So in effect, the financial recovery group will provide that oversight, manage risks, unblock things, take decisions. We had the first meeting of that group on Monday of this week. We're going to meet weekly to begin with for an hour and a half each week as a group, and bearing in mind that a significant amount of work will be happening underneath the financial recovery group, and in fact that's being established now. And we'll keep that under review in terms of how we want to operate it going forward. But I think a real focus, and again, just another positive to draw. I mean, I think, you know, this is an adverse situation. It's difficult. There are difficult conversations we're going to have and difficult decisions we're going to need to take along the way. But actually, the response from our teams has been really positive to this. And it could be all too easy to be a bit cynical about how we save money through to the end of this financial year. But it has such an important bearing strategically, I think, on future years and our performance in financial terms, and in terms of its impact on quality and safety and the care that we offer our patients. So it's all interconnected. I'm really pleased we've moved quickly on this, and you know, we've got the structure established now, and the reporting will happen regularly. And clearly, again, I will keep the board members fully appraised of how that's going. Second point around finance to make is that I received some correspondence from Jan Thomas, the Chief Exec of the ICB, on Friday of last week, indicating that the Trust will be entering the double lock process. Effectively, this is driven by the fact that it is a statutory function of every integrated care system to break even. There can be variations in terms of providers within a system, but that is still very much the challenge. The double lock principle introduces an additional level of oversight, and we will have a greater degree of oversight from the ICB going forward until such time as we recover our financial position. So a meeting is planned with Jan and her team when she returns from leave next week. Very helpfully, I think Jan is posting it to me as we want to talk together about how we make this process work, which is really encouraging, actually, and I think an opportunity for us, because one element of entering a double lock situation is that, yes, it constrains us, or we need to seek permission around investments, principally over £50,000. So it is an additional bureaucratic element to it as well. But we will also get senior reps from the ICB joining, to be agreed, committees. They may wish to attend board. All of that is to be talked through and agreed. But I see a really key role for an individual from the ICB, senior individual, to join our financial recovery group. And I think It gives us the opportunity to get the ICB much closer to the work we do as an organisation, improve its understanding of the work that we do. And it's an opportunity for us as well to really surface some of the areas where we feel we could use additional funding and where we might potentially be underfunded. And clearly we're gathering quite a bit of data at the moment to support those conversations as we go forward. So the detail around the double lock process is to be agreed and discussed between us. And clearly once I know sort of how it gets triggered and is in place, I'll be able to share further with board members at that time. Final point for me on this report is just around some of the exec team changes. I'm really grateful to Rowan Proctor and Carol Anderson for providing us with some short-term nursing leadership support. It was always intended to be short-term, and Carol and Rowan left us at the end of last week. We've now, as an interim measure, very kindly, Poonam is agreed to work with Holly Sutherland, who is taking on the lead role for the Chief Nursing Officer on an interim basis. And that will be through initially to the end of February. We have a new Deputy Director of Nursing starting with us at the end of February. And I'm meeting with him this week, actually, so that we manage his transition into the organisation. I'm going to invite him over to Elizabeth House so he can start meeting the teams and we can welcome him into the organisation. So that is something to look forward to. And clearly we trailed last time, I think, that with Debbie taking, I emphasise early retirement, as she keeps pointing out to me. Although it might feel like Holly could have a significant number of roles in the organisation, but if there is a gap, because we're out recruiting at the moment substantively to the COO role, interviews will be held during February. We completed the long listing last Thursday. We've got a really strong field coming forward, so that's really encouraging. If there is a gap between the appointee beginning and Debbie leaving us on retirement, then Holly has agreed to step up to provide some interim support in relation to that as well. So I'll stop there, Eileen, but there's quite a bit going on. So
Thank you, John. Yes, indeed. Lots of moving parts, and just to reiterate your thanks to colleagues at the ICB for the ongoing support. And I think we should be very welcoming of support on efficiency, which is always good to have fresh eyes, but the opportunity across our system to have more and better conversations about funding for services for mental health, community health, for children's services is what we expect to see coming through this process, to make sure that the impacts of the demand that we're facing for our services, where we're doing things which we're currently often not funded to do because it's the right thing to do, that we're able to actually shine a light on that. And that feels like an entirely sensible thing to do in partnership. So thank you, John, for that. Could we move then, John, for you to lead us through the board assurance framework?
Yes, thanks, Eileen. You have seen in Chief Executive report that was indicated there. If I could just remind board members that we agreed at a recent board development session that we would undertake a full review of the BAF, board assurance framework, and considering actually making some quite substantial changes. I noticed in the paper it references a ease of access, if you like, to the risks that we have as an organisation. I think what we have is actually something that has developed over time, but the time is right now to review the structure of the BAF, how we present it, but clearly also the sort of constituent parts of the board assurance framework. So we have an exec session lined up as a first run at that work today, and we're looking at not necessarily changing the strategic objectives of the trust, but certainly looking at them again and making sure they're current and fit for purpose. And from that will flow the kind of risks and controls and mitigations and sources of independent assurance that that generally constitute the makeup of the board assurance framework. So that's a piece of work that we are underway with, and we're looking to share that on the 22nd of February in first draft with board members at our next board development session. This is a bit of a change, I suppose. I'm leading off on the presentation. I've been discussing this with Eileen about how we manage that presentation at board. What I would like to do today, bearing in mind having the background of what I've just said around how we're looking to sort of readdress and review the board assurance framework going forward, I thought a summary from each of the directors actually in relation to key risks, and just by exception today, if we can, because I think some of those risks will emerge through discussion on papers that are on the agenda today as well. But if we look at strategic aim 1, and I'll maybe hand to Poonam in a second, just in relation to some of the quality risks. The first risk is around CPFT being able to deliver operationalise improvements to care and services within the mental health, learning disability and autism partnership. This has a mitigated risk score of 16. I'm loath to move it from that at the moment because we're on the brink of some quite important conversations with ICB colleagues around future of the partnerships, or the accountable business units, ABUs, as we've referred to them as. Principally actually around the opportunity to explore delegation of functions to the ABUs in the future. And that's not just the mental health ABU, it relates to the other 3 as well. There's a meeting with chief execs and chairs in February where we'll be discussing some proposals in that light. And so until we start to see some movement in terms of decision making there, I've left that risk score where it is. Just for board members' benefit, we take regularly through the Business and Performance Committee an update on the work that is undertaken in the partnership, and we use the private session as well for discussion, and we'll continue to do that for the remainder of this financial year and keep it under review. Poonam, could I ask you just around quality risk, if you would like to?
Yeah, sure. All of them that I'd like to highlight around the quality priorities. So we have undertaken a meeting and a piece of work with our Associate Directors of Nursing around the quality priorities, and we have agreed for a number of them to be transitioned into the 23-24 year just due to the size and scale of them. So we will be continuing to address those quality priorities. I think I know the sexual safety risk remains on the BAF, and that number has reduced from 20, which was last March, down to 12. And I feel there's a lot of positive work that has been done from a sexual safety point of view. Significant work has been undertaken to support our mental health important staff with the training. We've achieved that 90% compliance. I mean, there's so much, and I know we've shared the resources that we have undertaken and co-produced with our partners, but the figure remains at 12. We feel as there are a couple of additional outstanding areas around the gap analysis of the sexual safety standards, and but we are now moving into business as usual from a sexual safety point of view. Our target is 8. We have had the conversations with Safeguarding, who will continue to take on that oversight. There'll be more discussion again on Friday about this, Karen. But so that is a decreasing risk, but it remains at 12 with a view to reducing that down to 8.
I think that, thank you, Poonam. Absolutely so important to focus on this relentlessly, as we do with all our areas of risk. But yeah, this is one that we know we need to be alive to constantly. John, back to you.
Thanks, Ian. So planning to take this kind of in strategic aim order because it seems to make sense. Stephen, just around people culture.
Lovely, thanks very much, John. So obviously strategic aim 2 is putting people at the heart of CPFT, which I think is incredibly important. There are 4 key risks on the bar. One is around state of staffing, the second one is around staff fatigue, then staff vacancies, then organisational culture. I'll just pick a couple to talk through with the board. One is around staff vacancies. The initial risk score was 20, it's increased actually to 25. And basically what's driven that, even though actually currently at the moment we are actually showing vacancies below our 10% target, is very much the challenges we have around medical vacancies, around the inpatient vacancies that obviously We've discussed here previously the impact on the Mulberry opening, etc. Vacancies around our CAMH inpatient services as well, and vacancies around some of our community facilities. It is a national issue, but it doesn't sort of take away from the impact on CPFT. We have reviewed that risk in January, and we think it will maintain that 25. We are trying to reduce that down to a 12. But we do feel, given some of the challenges we face as an organisation, cost of living, type of issues that we've discussed, so that People and Culture Committee will continue to discuss, will impact on that risk sort of medium to long term. And then the other risk, just to sort of raise, is around the culture and the organisational culture. This was put on as a consequence of the cultural review that was issued in November/December 22. And again, basically having just reviewed it, that risk remains at 16. We want to try and bring that down to 5. This risk is, I think, really important given where the organisation is. We're focusing very much on sort of financials, etc. But we need to really invest in that sort of that cultural work, that engagement work across the organisation. We are beginning to see some green shoots around that. And again, in the actual People Agency report, you'll see some of the positive sort of feedback we've had around turnover, etc., but also more importantly around sort of the staff survey. And then of course we've got the big conversation, second big conversation work, and that will be feeding back up into the People and Culture Committee as well. I'm going to stop there and happy to answer any questions.
Hand back to John. If anybody's got any questions that are hanging over at the end of the bath, we'll take them together. So John.
Great, thanks, Eileen. And Kathy, just in relation to innovation research.
Yes, so we have a very good R&D structure, but it's rather separate and not particularly well embedded in our business as usual. So we're about to kick off a piece of work to look at how we can actually achieve that. The R&D team have an away day on Monday, and we are also meeting with Lauren as finance director to really make sure that we're optimizing our research income streams, and that we are also investing some of that income back into expanding our research and innovation activities. We've also got a very active innovation group now, and we in the last few weeks have been awarded 200,000 to expand our innovation team through a program called Insights. So this is really about looking at how we embed innovation in everyday practice. So this isn't a high risk, but it's something which we could really optimize. And my other risk on the bath is around the Children's Hospital. That's largely financial. So I'm not sure if Lauren wants to say anything about that.
Great, and if maybe tie this up together then. Lauren, would you mind sort of coming in on that?
Thank you. So yeah, I think the Children's Hospital one is on here. As you'll know, that case has been progressing through the governance journey, and there's another gateway coming in the next couple of months for which we're in the process of submitting papers. We're hopeful at that point we'll be able to revise down the risk around the Children's Hospital. That said, you'll see what's gone the other direction is the overall risk around making best use of our resources for finance, and that's increased to 20. So that's reflecting some of what John's spoken to already in the meeting in terms of how our spend is running this year. But I'll talk to that more when it comes to the finance paper. But we're hopeful that the introduction of a much more formal financial recovery group and structure will enable us to start to mitigate that risk more effectively.
Thanks, Lauren. I'll look around and see if there are any comments. Otherwise, I was going to come to Debbie.
Okay,
Yeah.
I guess the work that we're doing in operations feeds across all of the 4 strategic aims. And just to pick up some key pieces, really, we're working through the golden threads to ensure that we can embed the work that we need to do, but in particularly the efficiency plans, and so that fits very much into the making best use of resources, but in the use of innovation and workforce and making sure that we've got the right pathways in place. So that work has and does feed into some of these. It is something that we've I won't say struggled, but we've got traction and less traction, and most of that is around capacity and understanding our capacity and demand and having the right data in place. So that has been the focus over this last year. Going into next year, I'll talk more about where we've got to with our waiting lists and how the impact of having efficient pathways in place matters and helps us to improve our flow. And how that revising these will help to make us more efficient in the years to come. And I think we need to feature that more in the new VAP around how we draw out those pieces.
So we're hoping, very much hoping, come March, we'll have a slightly different looking VAP, one that's a bit pointier in terms of what it is really drawing attention to, and one that is capable of having some agility in being able to really bring to the fore quickly, pointily risks that we are working with in real time. So grateful for the work there. Has anybody got any questions on the VAP before we?
Could I just give a thank you to Caroline as well? And she will be very much keeping us under control as a group of execs and making sure we do what we need to do. So yeah, we'll obviously feedback and how that's progressing before the 22nd of February as well. So.
Ed, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I just actually wanted to pick up on your report and just to echo what you said about the response to the industrial action, which was obviously tremendous. Yeah. I talked to Ashley Shaw, who's the medical director at CUH, and he said their A&E department worked quite a lot better during industrial action. They started with consultants who were empowered and experienced enough to make difficult decisions that actually improved the flow through the system. And I suppose that made me wonder, you know, in the spirit of don't let a good crisis go on waits, what do you think might be the learnings from the industrial action? I mean, obviously there's been the opening up of extra capacity in the rehab unit. That sounds really positive. But do you think there are other things that we could learn from this experience?
But Debbie and Kathy racing to get here, which is fabulous. So Debbie, you go first. Then we'll go to Kathy.
So there is definite learning around how we deploy staff and decision making and accountabilities and how we learn from that. So yes, that's the item that you pointed out, and it happened across all our acutes. There was better flow during that period, and has been throughout all the industrial actions. So we need to learn from that. The impact for us is actually we got more discharges. So how do we cope with that is the other side of this. So we need to be able to be ready. But learning from, and I guess learning from what the decisions the consultants make, how they make them, and how appreciating they are junior doctors in learning, but how do we help to empower them to work differently within their scope of practice.
So I'd say there are a couple of things. So firstly, one of the less positive things is that we did expose areas of poor resilience. So particularly in our OPAC services, where we have
just want to say what OPAC is.
OPAC is our older people services. So we have a lot of medical agency staff in there. There is an ongoing review currently of demand and capacity, but looking at whether or not we have the right number of consultants to serve what is a growing burden. And if you think about the baby boomer generation next year, they're all going to hit the age where the demand on that service is going to be much higher. So we should really be forward planning for how we're going to look after, not just in mental health and community services, but across the NHS, how we're going to look after the tsunami of older people who are about to enter into their late 60s, early 70s. I suppose Ed's point, consultants always say this, let us be the decision makers at the front door. And I would love to see more of that, and I'd love us to be doing more of it. And I think that over a period of years, not just in this trust, but everywhere throughout the NHS, when there are efforts to save money and do things in a more financially efficient way, what tends to happen is the consultants are reserved for the most difficult cases. Whereas if you put consultants at the front, you cut out all that triage. So we often see people, being assessed 5-6 times before they get to a consultant. And I stress this isn't unique to our trust, but actually, and having worked in liaison psychiatry, where for a long time was largely a consultant-led service, we didn't see that. We would see a patient, and often that would be a one-off where we would be able to formulate a care plan and make sure it was implemented and move on. And if you have people who are less experienced, sometimes that's appropriate, but actually you can save a lot by putting consultants up front. And I would love to pilot something to try and see if we could get back to that.
And just to add that we are doing that, aren't we, with the flow piece?
Yes,
Actually, that is going to be medical led. I'll come on to that later, but that should help again. With that.
And bringing Karen is an excellent question, which we could spend all day talking about, Ed. So thank you for that. But I'm going to bring in Karen.
Yeah, just picking up on Ed's point and what you've just said there, Debbie. So where in the system will they pick this up as potentially a beneficial practice across the whole system? Because we can talk about it, probably the other trusts talk about it, but it's a system thing that needs to be picked up on and looked at as whether it's feasible to do it more often.
So there is a learning from industrial action group that is together across the system, and then we have our own in-house one as well to take the learning from. Last time it was picked up through, there is a group run by the ICB for chief medical officers, chief nursing officers and COOs that come together, which again meets next week, I think, a week after, and that's been an agenda item there to try and look at how we can learn and what we can take forward organisationally.
Again, we don't want to be a crisis.
Just let me stress again how crucial we have been in the types of services we run, the role that we play in helping with that flow piece. So the more that we can talk to each other about learnings, benefits, the right people in the right place, I think, shall we begin to address some of our financial issues rather more quickly, I think. Jeff, very quickly.
Very quick, I think it's a real quick one. We mentioned going into the last strike that there was a degree of sort of fatigue of the sort of stepping up piece. That doesn't sound like that came through in terms of the response.
No, it was more difficult to fill the shifts. So just to call out for how brilliant medical staffing has been. So I was going to do it in my report, but I may as well tell you now about the industrial action. So we've had 34 days of industrial action since March 2023. That represents 10 separate episodes of industrial action, all lasting 3 to 6 days each, with the longest being in January. Medical staffing over those periods have had to find largely consultants to fill 453 shifts, or sorry, 476 shifts, and they managed to fill 453. So that is a mega achievement. But what that's meant is actually pausing a lot of business as usual, all hands to the deck, ringing around individually to consultants when it's a junior doctor strike, saying, will you consider doing this? We did have to slightly increase our rates during the last strike because we had 6 days. And of course, it was running into weekends, which means it was a much longer period. We had essentially almost 2 weeks really without any regular business. But actually people, stood up to the plate and got on with it. And touch wood, it hasn't had some of the potentially disastrous impacts it could have. So we're very pleased, but we would also like it to go away.
So it's a very vexed and difficult subject, but we are grateful to everybody who's touched the sides of helping to keep our patients safe and to keep services being delivered. So Kathy, I can see that George is on. So George, in case you're wondering what earth's going on, are we running really behind? We've had to do some rejigging of the agenda. So I'm now going to go to Kathy for her CMO report, and then we'll come to you for your Guardian of Safe Working Hours report, if that's okay.
Okay, so I'll take the paper as read and I'll keep it fairly short. Some of the main things to point out, vacancies continue to be a problem. So we have an above national average vacancy rate for consultants and CPFT, and with a particular challenge in our older people services. And there is some disparity between the north and south of the trust, with the north having more difficult to fill posts. What we have done is we've kicked off a big piece of work, which is a medical workforce review, starting with part of that, which is a medical agency review. So what we've been doing is looking at medical agency spend, where our vacancies are, trying to get much better grip and control. And we are looking at how we can really create sustainable posts that are attractive for people. And that, of course, may mean some invest to save in order to achieve that. But actually, in the long term, that will be much cheaper than the amount of money we're currently spending on agency staff. Having said this, you know, it's not going to be a rapid turnaround, because this has been a long time in the making. You know, the vacancies have been a problem for some time. But what we have been seeing is an escalation of what medical agencies can charge. So we've seen a 240% increase in the costs of medical agency staff. So it's been well above the national cap for a very long time. So I feel positive about that piece of work. Yesterday we had, and John was present, a medical advisory group with very good attendance from consultants across the trust, and people. I presented very detailed information on all of this, and you know, the people were very keen to share ideas and to think about how they can actually help address this. The other area I've mentioned is job planning. So we are reporting job planning at around 35%, which is way below our 90% target. That varies across the directorates. What I would say is it's not as bad as it sounds, because one of the issues is that people are not using the electronic system, which is quite difficult to navigate. So all consultants have a job plan, but what hasn't happened is that it hasn't gone onto the electronic system. So I've asked for, within the next 3 months, we see at least 80% of those job plans on the electronic system as an interim measure, because what we're then doing as part of the medical workforce review is to kickstart some service level job planning. So this means that consultants will have their individual discussion with their clinical director about their professional needs and development. But then we will also have job planning, which involves operational needs and consultant groups, so that what we can see is what have we got available in terms of consultant time, what's best value for money in terms of what functions they take on, and what is the demand. So we really need the operational colleagues to furnish that. And we discussed that a bit yesterday as well. In terms of training, good news, we've got 100% occupancy of our training posts. We had a very good GMC survey with 2 or 3 small areas which we have put in a GMC improvement plan for, and are confident that we can address. Jorge will probably bring up a couple of things, in particular areas like phlebotomy, but we've been working with Debbie and our nursing leads to try and address that. So I think that is probably all I'm going to say. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Kathy before? Do you want to introduce Jorge and his very special role?
Yes,
Okay, I'm just going to bring in Ed.
So I'm going to pick on the good news, is that we're 100% fully staffed at the junior medical grades. So my question is, what happens to all those people, you know, when they are consultant accredited? Why are they not looking for jobs as consultants in CPFT? And what can we learn from the trainees about how we refashion the consultant grade so it's a bit more attractive to our own talent as it kind of reaches that point?
Absolutely. So we had a bit of a discussion about that yesterday. And in fact, we had a couple of trainees who were acting into consultant posts, which was very useful. And we also had some consultants who had come to posts in our trust from other trusts, so they'd worked as consultants elsewhere. The first thing to acknowledge is that nationally, there is a trend for trainees to be less likely to seek consultant posts than previously. So many are saying, I'd like to go off and make some money and be a locum for a while. And that is happening.
Yeah.
And that's because you make a lot of money now as a locum. you know, it's almost out of control. And that's not just CPFT, that's nationally. Secondly, there have been huge opportunities opening up in private practice. So a lot of people are going into private practice, and there were discussions about whether or not, you know, the trust need to think about whether we provide opportunities for private practice which are ethical and don't create a two-tier system, but actually that would benefit the trust, and it would potentially hold on to many of our consultants. There was also a lot of talk about, you know, heat and burn, and how relentless that has been following COVID, and that there is a need to really look at job plans that are satisfying. As part of our medical workforce review, we are creating a menu of SPA time, so people can actually pick from this menu. So it speaks to their personal development needs, their professional development needs, and their interests, but it also supports the trust's strategic objectives. So that might be research, training, innovation, management, etc. But we need to recognise that we are in a very competitive market. We need to strive. I mean, if I were a young person looking for a post, I would want to be going somewhere where it was a striving organisation, where I would have the opportunity to grow and the opportunity to, you know, provide the best quality care. And that is our aspiration here. But we need to make it a reality that the jobs allow people to do that. So, you know, when the is going, people just hunker down and get on with it. But as we know, there's no such thing as winter pressures anymore. So it's really about rethinking all of this. We have some very good projections in the future. But we'd love Ed as Ed, who is a psychiatrist, to involve us.
Right, we're going to have to push on. I said it was a very busy agenda today. Do you want to introduce Jorge?
Yes. Okay. Very welcome. Thank you for coming. Jorge is our absolutely brilliant guardian of safe working. So Jorge, I think you're probably better off giving a description of what you do, which is really outlined in your report.
But you're very welcome. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Eileen, and good morning, everyone. So yes, I'm a consultant psychiatrist. I work at Springbank Ward, which is just across the road from you guys. And my role as guardian started in 2016. And the point of it was to try and make sure that the trusts are following the safeguards of the new trainee contract, which I suppose the good news is that every time that we have a meeting about this here, I say the same thing, which is fortunately we do meet the safeguards. Trainees in other places may be working excessive hours that are beyond, because there's not enough trainees and the rotas are very heavy, etc. That's not the situation at CPFT, which is positive news. So what I've been doing since monitoring, and what I get a lot of information from is the issues that are affecting trainees at the moment. So at present, I've made some suggestions, and I suppose that going back to the points that have already been discussed, it is a lot about trainee well-being, and from my perspective, the risk is if the trainees don't feel that they are being listened to on sometimes pretty minor issues that are very solvable, the interpretation from that is CPFT doesn't appreciate me, etc. I might not look for a consultant job here. So, you know, as you can see in the report, there's some minor issues about air conditioning and access to facilities and phlebotomy that are pretty solvable, I think, but that have been there for a while. And just to give you some context, a previous issue was the fact that trainees had no in the south didn't have a mess, didn't have a place to rest and a room, and so that took years to kind of get to, and at the moment they have a small room. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that these particular issues touch all the trainees that go through CPFT, and so for example the fact that there's no air conditioning in their sleeping room, you know, trainees working in the north and the south, this has been raised. We've had meetings. There is money to pay for it, but there's quite a lot of resistance. So none of these issues are breaching the safeguards of the new contract, but I do think particularly given the stark increase in locum fees, which is primarily from consultants over the last year or two, that these issues matter. And yeah, I'm happy to take any comments, and I would be happy to take some information from here back to the trainees as to what we're going to do about this.
Thank you so much. Well, I think one or two colleagues are bored with me on the subject of phlebotomy, and can we not please do something about phlebotomy and sorting that out? So, Jorge, I am trying to do my best on that one personally. Debbie.
Sorry, and just to say, I'm working with the operational directors to look at what the plan can be around phlebotomy, how we can increase the number of support staff that are trained appropriately to be able to deliver that. So it is in train. We're not there yet. I really appreciate that, but we are looking at it.
And in terms of the rest facilities, let's collectively make ourselves curious as a board on that. Lauren may be coming in on that matter.
Yeah, thank you. It's a shame, Jorge, we didn't pick this up when I was over at Springbank a couple of weeks ago for the quiz. But I will reach out to you because I have been looking at this with Alison Estates. The challenge is because we have such limited capital funding, it would mean prioritising the staff facility in this example over some of the changes we're making to patient facilities, which is often to make those much more safe. But that said, we have said we'll look at it, and we're looking at it for potential in terms of funding this year. Obviously, we're monitoring all the schemes very closely towards the end of the year. If there's any slippage, it is on the list that we're considering, but I'll pick this up with you directly, Jorge.
So, yeah, and I suppose that there is £46,000 on the Guardian budget that the trainees were happy to use if necessary.
Yeah, the challenge is it's the wrong type of funding for capital works. So that's the difficulty we get into, because we actually, I think we try to offer Dyson fans and things because that can be done from revenue funding, but if we want actual fitted air conditioning, it has to come out of the stuff that we use to maintain our sort of facilities and core buildings.
All right, well, hopefully a pragmatic way through. I don't want to get into the vagaries of public sector finance because it is baffling at times. Karen, and then we do have to move on.
I don't know how big the room they're talking about is, but is there any reason why we just can't buy some air conditioning?
I think that's what Lauren has just been talking about. And that's
just buy them and put them in.
Yeah.
Not that hard.
And that, I think that was part of the, we could buy portable good air conditioning units, but we just couldn't install the full kit. So we'll go with that. Would that work?
It's a tiny room, so I suppose it's up to
Probably not the
states.
place to sort it out.
Yeah,
think
it would be good to have a response before summer.
I think what we can say, given the medical workforce review, given the conversation we've just had and Ed's question as well, I think we can make a commitment that we're going to sort this out.
Right, thanks.
So you can go back with a little win, however, and
Move me up when the
but the commitment on phlebotomy, which is a really important aspect of service design, to be honest, in terms of making sure we have access to a core and pretty basic thing to do, feels important. So Jorge, thank you for your report. We see you regularly, and I'm sure if there was anything of concern, you'd bring it forward without having to make a report. So you know how to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If it's okay, could we move on, Pri, to taking your report from the second meeting, I think, the People and Culture Committee?
That's correct. Hi everyone. So since the last trust board, we've had one meeting on the 8th of December. We are, so as a committee, we are relatively new, but we're trying to provide board assurance, development and delivery of people strategy, and also providing an overview of the work called culture delivery plans, which includes the NHS people plan as well. We're following a slightly new way of presenting what we're actually showing. So we've split it into things to alert the board to, which we currently don't have anything at that sort of red level. In terms of advice, first thing is freedom to speak up. We are seeing a slight increase in concerns raised, but having worked quite closely with our freedom to speak up guardian, that we're taking as a positive, that actually we're encouraging people to be very open, certainly in terms of the cultural review and us trying to be more transparent with our staff and encourage them to be transparent back. we are encouraged that actually more concerns are raised, because it gives us the opportunity to know what's happening and also to then be able to address those and work where we need to with HR colleagues and also with Freedom to Speak Up to make things better. And the second thing we wanted to raise was about shaping our future together. So as Stephen mentioned, the second stage of the big conversation is taking place, and obviously there's a lot of output, a lot of input into that, and the output will come back and be discussed early this year. And as a committee, we'll follow up on the output from that and then report back to the public board. The third one is a sort of formality, as it were, which is the self-assessment, education and training report. We have completed it, standards have been met, and there's a bit of a common theme. There are some challenges, but we will follow up on those, certainly with Stephen and his team. Another thing which is a legal requirement is the annual workforce race equality standard, or the RES report. So it's an annual data collection exercise. We are making improvements in this area, but we also note that there is still a lot of work to do in terms of the lived experience of our employees, for our minority ethnic employees. And I think, again, there's a bit of a common theme. I think we need as much transparency as possible from our staff, but also we need our line managers to be, open to the fact that, this is how employees are feeling. And whether they've spoken up or not, there are still a significant number of employees that are facing harassment or discrimination, either from colleagues or from patients or families. And it is important that these are things that impact on how people feel about working for us. In a similar vein, the Workforce Disability Equality Standard, or DES report, it's another data collection exercise performed on an annual basis. We have seen some slight improvements in some areas, but there are still really significant pieces of work to be done, so that employees with disabilities, whether those are seen or unseen, and whether they are something that impacts on how they perform their work or doesn't, it's about how people feel about it. And so I think we do need to be really open to that and encourage people to speaking up. And again, it takes a sophistication of line management to be able to encourage those conversations and to make changes where we need it. But we will absolutely work with Stephen and ask lots of questions about what's coming through. And the final point from me, well, no, it's not the final point, sorry, in terms of this area, there's still a lot of recruitment going on. The vacancy levels and the turnover are decreasing, which is encouraging, but there is still, there are still pockets where we need to be concerned, and I know Stephen's team are aware of that, and places where we need to apply some scrutiny. In terms of assurance, so I want to be slightly more, the green area, as it were, we've recruited a number of new Freedom to Speak Up ambassadors, so I'd like to, on the record, thank all of them for volunteering to be part of this. I think we've all seen nationally the importance of Freedom to Speak Up. I think we've got a really good structure within CPFT, but there is always more we can do, and it comes back always to people being more open and more transparent and happy to make the changes that we need to make as well. And I know that Freedom to Speak Up have a good working relationship with Stephen's team in terms of taking the issues that are raised, shining a light on them, but actually things have to change. It's great that people speak up. What's more important is that things actually change and we can demonstrate where positive changes have been made. Shaping our future together. So there were 4 immediately implemented initiatives that are either implemented already or in progress, and we will follow up on those. And finally, really positive feedback on the Wellbeing Hub, so feedback from employees about the service provided. And we were asked, this is my final point, just to highlight some areas of good practice. We are really, really encouraging employees to speak up in whatever format they do that. And transparency for me is really important. And a small but really important thing is that a Freedom to Speak Up issue raised by an employee led to a positive change in how our systems record absence due to miscarriage. Yes, it impacts a certain number of our employees, but actually we thought that's a really positive thing to highlight. And that's it. Take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Pri. Great to see this committee getting going. And of course, Jackie, who's with us today, is going to be joining you in that endeavour to really make it a vibrant part of our good governance. Stephen, can we hand to you, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. So this is the People and Agency report. It covers, a number of metrics around the people and culture function. It also covers the sort of the agency metrics as well. And it's a standard report we've been doing for about 18 months. Just to highlight a couple of sort of key points, really. First of all, as Please already said, and you'll see in the sort of the metrics, the vacancy rate remains below target. We're talking about the risk discussion earlier on, but we have seen it slightly turn, and certainly in November it started to go up, in December it started to go up. It's literally less than a percentage point, but again, that is sort of something that we clearly need to watch very, very carefully. We continue to do a sort of a high level of turnover when it comes to actual the number of people applying in the CPFT, which is positive. And then aligned to that, we still have some challenges around that sort of time to hire, time to recruit. Though in the December figures, actually, that's come down to actually 10%, which again is positive. But we still continue to have a very close sort of contractual relationship with Heels Medical around sort of doing our occupational health services and supporting staff into the organisation. A couple of other points then basically is talk about medical and non-medical vacancy panels are up and running. And again, that's proving really quite helpful in the context of understanding not just that, they're not just for the financial challenge, but it's also really helpful to begin to understand some of the sort of the issues around sort of recruitment and what's that throwing up, but also some of the issues around some of the posts going through and whether we need to sort of review certain areas. For example, do we need to look at sort of admin roles going forwards? Do we need to look at some of the more corporate roles going forwards? And so it's giving us a sort of a window into some of that more detail in the organisation, which again, I think is really, really positive. And then just my final point really is the Shaping Our Future Together work is drawing to a close in the context of the actual actions itself. But obviously, that cultural work that we talk about a lot here, we're talking a lot about in the People and Culture Committee, will continue and actually will only grow. And I think it's really important that we continue to push that, given some of the financial challenges and give some of the sort of the areas that we're going to be focusing on. And I think one of the positives we've seen that sort of that increase in the staff survey feedback. And again, the staff survey results themselves are embargoed until at least February, and then they're benchmarked nationally, and then we'll get the formal results. They'll be issued nationally in March, but so we'll get the benchmark results in February. But our own raw results we've got, and they're showing quite a positive swing for the organisation. So again, I think that's positive, but I can't talk any more in a public board about that at the moment. And then my final point is appraisals. I think it's fair to say that remains a significant challenge for the organisation. We have done a detailed piece of work in December, and this is obviously reporting November's appraisal rate. And we have actually seen it slightly turn in December in the latest figures I got a couple of days ago. There is a detailed action plan behind that. We will be bringing that to the People and Culture Committee. There is a great level of focus now across the organisation on appraisals. And again, we'll go through that action plan and some of the key risks associated with that as well at next week's People and Culture Committee.
Thank you, Stephen. A good place to end on appraisals. I think there's nobody around this board table who's in any doubt that we have an expectation that the tide is going to turn on completion rate and appraising. Appraisals are not an optional extra. They are something that must be done. They should be a positive thing, a point of review and reflection. So let us make sure that we're not having this conversation again. Okay, are we all right to move on? Okay with moving things along? In which case, Jeff, we come to you for Business and Performance Committee.
So thank you, Eileen. So I'll take the reports read. Really, 3 themes. I'll say about all 3 themes. So 2 about limited assurance and 1 about a discussion we've already touched on around capacity. So taking the report as read, this was the December, I think, 12th meeting. So in terms of the assurance framework, the lowest level of assurance is limited, and that it's important to point out that within the report there are 2 areas that are classified as limited assurance by the committee. One is finance, which has been in that position for some time, and it's not for any other reason that when you look at the assurance, the framework says if there is a strategic risk, there's a risk that the organisation is not able to complete its obligations or indeed not perform to its strategy, then we have to put limited assurance. I won't preempt what Lauren will be coming to in terms of the finance report. I would say we were at a month 7 position then. So as ever, there's a lag. That's end of October. Obviously, an awful lot has happened, as we've discussed this morning since then. But what was really clear, having gone through the halfway point of the year, is that the deficit and the component elements behind it are uncomfortably sticky and resilient. And we're clearly not just talking about a year-end challenge and a system challenge. We're talking about a longer-term challenge for the trust CPFT that we urgently need to do something about. In terms of and related to it, in terms of the other area that we reduced from partial to limited assurance was actually improvement board report. I think it's really important to say there's so much great work that's gone into the planning and project management. The reason for the move to partial assurance is the risk that, and I think we understand this is always a huge risk, that loads and loads of great work goes on, but the recurring efficiencies that the trust absolutely desperately needs to secure aren't necessarily coming through or not, they're not necessarily visible. So so that's important to say. It's not that there isn't great work going on, but it's been really realistic, clear-eyed about the fact we do need to generate those efficiencies. And in discussion of that, we had a long, very useful discussion about capacity, wider conversation capacity. There were two elements there. One was out of area placements, which talked about, and of course, this pre-Mulberry 3 reopening. At the time of going into the meeting, we had 32, but it changes on an almost daily basis. We had 32 out of area placements, and it's a stubborn driver of both costs and I think people's concerns about quality of care. What does that actually feel like for somebody to be away from family and not, if you like, within the bailiwick of CPFT? We had an interesting discussion because there's been a lot of focus on Mulberry 3 and to some degree Phoenix, but there was a conversation about more widely, what is the ultimate capacity of the trust? Because there are pockets of beds and capacity. And how do we set that target? So what would it look like? It seems like a crazy ambition given everything we know about staffing, but nonetheless, you have to set yourself that target. So what would that look like? Because you go to that point and understand what does that look like to do all of that. We make a massive impact on the population we serve, and we have the ability to wipe out the challenges within the deficit. You can see it very clearly. So that capacity piece was primarily about our, if you like, medical or clinical state. Also, given that we've had a couple of board meetings now at Peterborough Town Hall, it's interesting that we all sort of said, oh, these are really nice. I know a lot's happened since Town Hall, but probably unfortunately example. But there was nonetheless, we're wondering, thinking, wow, these are great facilities and no one's really here. And there's a conversation, there's got to be a conversation with the system as well as internally say, right, there's so much. Peterborough's a great example. You don't have around Peterborough, you see blue NHS sign going on Thorpe Road here, there, everywhere. And there's opportunities. So it is like a little bit like the conversation about the air conditioner. It's just a case we have to get on and do this. So around those aspects. So it was a really useful conversation, but there's also a route. So I just wanted to mention that in respect of the capacity conversation, tying in with the recurring efficiencies to then tie in with the challenges that Lauren's going to take us through now.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jeff. And you're sat next to Jane, who in due course will be taking over business and performance from you. So you'll be having lots of lively discussions.
And bending over, aren't I?
Yeah, a number of batons being passed. You'll be ready for the Olympics by the time we're done. Debbie, I'm going to come to you, and you've got a presentation on waiting lists, which I really want people to have. So if you could be incredibly brief by exception only, assume everybody has read the performance report.
Yeah,
anything.
Just a couple of things I just want to do. So just to mention right care, right person, which is at the top of the report. There are a number of risks around this. The first phase went really well. We're now into the second phase around patients that go AWOL and support from the police. It has raised some concerns around what staffing will be required for this, what resource, what policies will be in place. And it was due to go live on the 19th of February, I think was the right date. And we've met with the police earlier this week, had some long discussions and agreed a delay to that start. So we've got some more work to do internally to make sure we know what needs to be in place so that we can have a plan ourselves to work with the police. But we're working really positively with partners and the police around this, and they were very understanding of our situation and wider the acute trust as well. So that feels really positive. We've mentioned Mulberry 3, the beds are open. We do now have a plan in place around how we will then open a further 4 beds and then ultimately fully open the ward as soon as possible. That is subject to recruitment. We do have a fine balance between substantive staff and agency staff, and we don't feel for safety reasons we could tip that any further with more agency. We've got interviews, we've got 5 band 5s being interviewed over the next week or so, a number of band 6s. So we have people, and it's all taking place as part of the recruitment process, but it will take us that bit of time. And then the Phoenix, a new model has been agreed. That's been tweaked a number of times. We're going to discuss it at the Quality and Safety Committee on Friday. And there is a meeting with the Provider Collaborative tomorrow to hopefully agree that we can take that forward. So as soon as we have more information on that, I'll provide that. And we have covered the system support, but a big thanks to everybody involved in that, because it's been really difficult, and the opening of all the beds at CRU. And I guess in all the pieces I've said a big thanks, particularly Mulberry and Phoenix. Been lots of work undertaken in those areas. So I'll take us on to the presentation I've got, which is a number of slides, which I'm sure we'll share with those that haven't got it after the meeting. So I'm not going to go through every slide individually, but I will highlight some of the slides as I go through. So if you take us on to slide 2, just to highlight, so we're doing lots of work across operational services and have been for the last 12 months around both waiting list management and inpatient flow. We have objectives that we want to ensure that all of our services across CPFT come within the 18-week wait, which is actually set for consultant-led services, which not all our services are, but we do think that's a standard we should aspire to. In fact, we would like to aspire to have no waits at all, but we have to take this in a stepped approach. And that we're ensuring that all our patients are waiting well, and that we have the right data in front of us to manage our waiting list. So we have developed the patient list, patient PTL, I want to call it, but I know the patient tracking list. Apologies. I'm so used to using acronyms, I do apologise. So if we go on to the next slide, we've done lots of work on the patient tracking list to ensure, with information performance, to ensure we have the right patients in the right place, and we know that we're treating people in the right order, that they come into our services and that they are risk assessed within that. So that's the piece of work that's happening. Those meetings, PTL meetings, happen across all the directorates for all the services we have currently on the PTL. There are still a few more to go on, and we within that manage those waits, and the services oversee that on a weekly basis, and that has become part of business as usual now to look at those waiting lists regularly. The next slide, I won't go into. Slide 4 is on progress, and then the next few slides show where we are across the directorate, slides 5, 6, 7 and 8. But I'm going to take us down to slide 9 now, which just highlights what a PTL looks like. And this is what the teams are working with, so that they know how many are now over 18 weeks, they know where they are, at what level weeks they are, and can dig into those individual patient cases to work to see whether patients have first appointments now or not. And in some cases, understanding how many first appointments have been cancelled by patients as well, because people do wait and do cancel their appointments, so we can have those discussions. On to slide 10, just sort of highlighting some of the challenges of our major waits, which are in our ADHD and CLASS services, so Cambridge Lifespan Autism Spectrum Service, because I know a number of people ask me what CLASS is, and how we've been managing those. So those are the areas where we have our longest waits and are of concern. But to highlight, we're working really closely across the system with this. This is a national issue, but we want to make sure we're getting it right for people locally, and trying to understand the capacity versus demand. Unfortunately, we're only commissioned to deal with a very small number, and actually the number that we are commissioned to deliver, we're receiving that number of referrals monthly at the moment. So, and that's an annual, what we're commissioned to deliver annually, so we're having to work through that. Slides 11, sorry, the next slide does highlight those ongoing challenges, and additional to that, there have been ADHD medication shortages, which we've worked really closely with our pharmacy colleagues in the system to help alleviate. Things are improving, but it is very slow, and has caused additional anxiety. So if we go on to slide 13, and just to highlight our next steps with waiting lists, to enhance all the work that we're doing is to continue to develop the access policy so that we have a clear policy for people coming into services, and how we will manage them and engage with those people. It does have to be slightly nuanced for some services. What's for children can't necessarily be the same for older people, and physical health and mental health, obviously, we have differences there as well. So that is being worked upon, being developed, out to consultation with the directors, and we'll go out to patients and carers as well, and look at how we manage do not attend appointments in a really positive way, because sometimes, as we well know, mental health patients don't attend because they're unwell, and not because they don't want the appointment. Patient tracking list will continue to be developed. We're working through it, as I say, on a weekly basis. Our performance team are helping to ensure that all of our staff are on the patient tracking list, and so we're nearly there with that, but still more work to do. On to slide 14, the waiting well piece is key and something that we're linked into the system doing. So we're ensuring that patients are waiting well, we're reducing harm to people waiting on lists, that they're having the right assessment, and that we're ensuring that they have contact, and we're using peer support workers to work alongside with us. And we've got a meeting on Friday morning with Emma and the peer support work team to look at how we can enhance that further. And then finally, linking back to the piece that Kathy raised earlier around job planning. Medical job planning, hugely important, but we want to ensure that all staff have really clear job plans in place. And that's new for some professions, doing it in the way that we'd like to do it. And that will allow us to understand our capacity and demand much better, and be able to plan services better, and help teams to be able to manage their caseloads. Until we've done some of this, it's going to be really hard to work that with commissioners to say, have we got the right level of commission service, because we need to understand our services in depth. But huge thanks to the team that are doing this work and the operational managers engaging, and a few big thanks to the performance team and information team who've been getting the information to us. I'll move quickly on then to inpatient flow on slide 15. A piece of work, obviously, that we really want to focus on, because we're having a number of out-of-area placements. We would like to ensure that there are no out-of-area placements. So particularly focused in mental health, although we do look at flow across our physical health services as well. Patient flow in mental health has never really been a topic of high conversation across any mental health organisation. It has really come to the fore since COVID, and for many reasons, but we do now have some guidance from NHS England that came out last October, and we're working towards that. It's enhancing what we'd already started and have in place, but it is ensuring that we have the right capacity in place. So again, information and performance, giving us key information, and developing that central function across CPFT that manages inpatient flow, and that will be medically led. We have a medic who we put out to advert. We've had interest in that, and I'm hoping we're going to appoint really quickly. Kathy, I know that's in train, so that will soon be in place, with other clinicians wrapped around that to help with the support, and that will be managing across all inpatient areas ultimately, but we will focus on adults first to ensure that we're reducing those out-of-area placements. We've had on the next slide, slide 16, which I won't focus on, we've had the dashboard developed, and on slide 17, if you just show that very quickly, you can see the flow. We have had a large reduction over recent months. It has gone up again. That is some seasonal, and some we just need to keep, as I say, foot on the pedal and keep really watching what's happening and understanding what's going on in ward areas. And the busier wards get, it's harder to do some of the work, but we need to keep them focused on what's important and ensuring patients are in the right place at the right time. So on to slide 18, which sets out our principles and objectives for flow. I won't go through those in detail, but we are really focusing on these and ensuring that it is about outcomes of care for patients, making sure, as I say, they're getting in place in the right place at the right time. And then if I move us on to the last slide, which is the next steps for both the areas, what we're doing, and we're really focusing on how we can enhance, particularly in mental health, ensuring the 333 model is in place and working well, that we've got the right liaison with external partners and a team in place to support all of this, and say physical health as well. And we're working with that team to ensure that our flow is better. A lot of that is linked to local authorities and ensuring the right packages of care are going to patients. I'll take breath now. I have rushed through that. And there may be questions either now or happy to give more detail outside of the meeting.
I'm just checking with Karen. I think this paper was put in the pack. It was yesterday. So if people didn't have it in paper, they've looked at it a little bit earlier. If you go back into your papers, you'll find that Debbie's very comprehensive presentation is there and available. And well, thank you and the team for the work you are doing on this. It's so important. But the thoughtfulness with which you articulated what you're doing. Do we have any questions at all here in the room for Debbie on this work? Ed.
Yeah, so thanks, Debbie. So I was very interested, the two areas where you've got the highest waiting lists are, as I understood it, sort of autism, neurodevelopmental and adult ADHD. And I mean, adult ADHD is not one because, I mean, 20 years ago, it didn't really exist. I mean, you know, it was regarded as an adolescent disorder. So this is a kind of completely new group of patients coming through. And I suppose I have a question there about how do we negotiate by providing services for, you know, an unprecedented clinical category, you know, and making sure that we've got that. And the other, I've got two questions, sorry. The other one is about the neurodev bit. And it speaks a little bit to the systems work, because there is some there are neurodevelopmental and neurogenetic services in CUH, for example. Maybe there are others around the system. And I'm sure you're thinking about this, but how could we more efficiently organise across the system potentially to shift that waiting list?
So both those areas have system-wide groups in place now, led by the ICB. Fairly recent for both of them. And so we are linking across and linking with the private sector as well, because some ADHD assessments were being done in the private sector. People were being diagnosed with ADHD and then coming to us wanting medication because the private sector weren't providing medication. And we've had to do some work to align assessments because not all assessments are equal. And you know, some people have even done the online assessment, which highlights whether you've got ADHD or not, and you know how robust they are. We've had to be very careful around that. And we've been working really closely with the ICB to ensure that the right clinician services are in place in the private sector, and therefore we can accept referrals from there if needed. But the growth has been huge. It's been national. There's been a lot of media attention around ADHD in adulthood and not being diagnosed in childhood, and therefore people have lived with it for a long time. And I guess we're managing the fallout of that at the moment. And the key for us is working through, have we got the right people who need the service? And have they had the right assessment, and therefore do they need the medication, which obviously we've had issues with as well. So masses of work to do. The other issue within all of that is the number of staff we have trained to deal with ADHD. There just aren't lots of staff out there that manage ADHD, and we need to look internally how we can grow our own, but that's in the context of wider recruitment issues as well.
Thank you, Debbie. It's such an important, the issue, we would perhaps take it as a board topic to talk about ADHD and autism, because I think we reference it a number of times, but to come back to it, and in talking to some of our clinicians who are dealing with both children, young people and adults, what they do say is people are resorting to using private sector providers to get diagnosis, and some of those are good.
Yes.
So we need to acknowledge that some of them are good, but others are coming through who have been distressed by diagnoses which we actually are having to reverse, and that becomes an additional cause of anxiety. So we kind of do need to understand better what we can do better to help. But I think, Debbie, we should thank you again and the team for that work. And I think we are going to have to move on to something which we've touched on already during the course of this meeting, but Lauren, the finance report.
Thank you. Appreciating there's quite a bit of detail packed into the slides. I'll take those as read, but if I can also bring us up to date in terms of some of the conversations. So the year-to-date position now is 8.8 million deficit against a planned deficit of 300,000, so that's 8.5 million off where we intended to be. The reported position for month 9 was actually a 200k deficit in the month, and so it's like slowing of the overall position. However, that is due to new arrangements around income with the ICB and system partners. And I guess what we've been focused on our discussions today is the actual underlying expenditure rate of the organisation. We continue to struggle with those things we've struggled with since the start of the year, which is efficiency slippage and the non-recurrent nature of our efficiency programmes, as well as the higher medical agency use and dependency and out of area placements. I guess at this point in the year, being towards the end of of January now, we are very much looking ahead to next financial year, and our sort of first view of that is that these issues will continue to be with us. So whilst it's looking challenging across the NHS for next year, we're particularly concerned in terms of CPFT and what we can do to get ahead of it and get a grip of these things. It has already been mentioned, but we've stood up a more formal financial recovery group and framework. There's a real focus on the next 10 weeks to reduce expenditure this year so that we can still come to the break-even position as forecast for this year, in terms of allowing for other income as well within there. But really, what can we do next year to start to get the groundwork in place for recurrent efficiencies for those that actually make transformational change and stay with us and embed into the organisation? And that's really our focus. As John's referenced, we anticipate more scrutiny going forwards. If we move into a double lock position, then the ICB colleagues would join us in approving expenditure over 50,000. Now, whilst that might sound as a headline quite a high number, that's actually a very low value in terms of running our services and operating our organisation. So that's the infrastructure that we're working on now, and we've got strong relationships there. So hoping that we can collaboratively come up with something that is effective for them in terms of assurance, but also really adds value to us in terms of changing the makeup of our spend and helping us get a grip of these things. So that's the focus for, I guess, the coming months, and really lead into the business planning for next year, where we'll be very focused on trying to get back to a balanced position in terms of the ongoing trading run rate of the organisation. Sorry, I think the boardroom's on mute. There isn't an option at this end to unmute it.
Cheers, Chris.
You're back with us.
Right, Lauren, what should we do?
It was quite a long pause.
Well, it was a very long pause for thought, but then you just told us something very important, haven't you? So before I was taking questions, Lauren, what I was going to say is it's important to remember that significant drivers of expenditure over plan are the costs of agency staff and the costs of out-of-area placements. Taken together, they represent many millions of pounds that we would at least prefer, at least some of it was not having to be spent. And we've heard some discussion today on some of the issues that are driving it, but that's got to be a core part of our focus, to have right skills in place to do the job, who are our staff, so less reliance on agency, and that we have sufficient capacity to actually keep our patients here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough who need inpatient care. So those are two really knotty issues for us to address. But others are available, that's for sure. Anybody want to come in with any questions at all here in the room or observations? Debbie?
So I guess you've heard the work that we're doing on the out-of-area placements and that balancing against the Mulberry beds. The work that we've done, we believe that there's more gain to be had from improving flow at this point because of the staffing issues. So just sort of and the agency balance. So we're really focusing on that flow to try and bring those patients down, patient numbers down. The balance is, and it's a really tricky one that we're having to work with clinicians on, is ensuring that only the right people are going out of area. But then that they don't feel that they can't send people out of area either, that puts a patient at risk. So I just sort of wanted to highlight that with the financial piece.
So first and foremost will always be the safety of our patients and the effectiveness of the care that they are receiving. But we do have a duty and responsibility with public money to make sure that every single pound is spent well. And that is what we are focusing on now. And as we were saying earlier, welcome the engagement of our partners, many of whom in our system recognise the huge value that we bring to them in helping them to manage their pressures. And we want to continue to do that. So beyond the immediate, how can we be more efficient? We do need to be able to have conversations that talk about what should our investment be in community, children's and mental health services in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough against this ski slope that is now sort of going into a massive period of growth of demand for our services. And that's a national picture, not just for us. Any more questions at all for Lauren or observations that anybody wants to make? Ed?
So can I just want to pick up on something Jeff said earlier, which as I understood it was that we've got enough underutilised capacity in the system to clear the out-of-area placements, or was that effect?
Yes, calculation, it's more than it would eat into it.
Eat into it.
Yeah.
So I suppose I just want to clarify that equation, but also just to dig into a little bit more, what do we actually mean by capacity? Is it beds? Is it actual physical infrastructure that we're not using, or is it staff, or is it some unholy mixture of the both? We're not able to open beds because we have. So is it fundamentally a staffing issue? And I suppose what I'm getting to is, do we have the same root cause for both the agency spend and the out-of-area placements, which is we don't have enough good quality permanent staff?
If we could get a response to Ed's excellent question, I'm going to go to Rick and then we are going to have to move on. So
it's all of the above, I think, in the sense that it's a mixture of those things. But it is looking at what space we have available across the trust and how we use those beds. And, you know, we need to really get underneath some of that, I think, with the ICB and the system to see whether or not, you know, we've got the right balance in the right places.
Very important work to do.
It is very big piece of work. We have started some of those discussions in the background, but it needs really defining, clarifying on what we're going to do next.
Yeah. And certainly when I talk to chairs of other trusts, they're very keen that we are able to support them in their flow, and it does frustrate me when I see that there are areas where we could be doing that, where actually we're not able to open beds. So the fact we are opening beds at the moment is great. Yeah. The more we can do that, the better. Rick, did you want to come in?
Yeah, very conscious that, as everyone said, this is a national issue, not just a CPFT issue. But learning from that, there's some evidence in the national picture that some staff are going part-time in order to make available time for them to then have agency and or bank work. And I just wonder whether that is something we're seeing in our trust.
I think that's a really good question, Rick. I'm not sure we're necessarily seeing significant amounts of staff suddenly going part-time, certainly from a nursing, AHP, etc., in order to join an agency. You know, the majority of our staff are already on our bank, doing bank, I hasten to add. But I think we heard from Kathy earlier on around some of our challenges around medical staffing, who are basically sort of not coming to CPFT and going on to agency, primarily driven for two reasons. And one is around sort of pay, levels of remuneration, and secondly, flexibility. That, you know, the younger generation wants a much greater level of flexibility, and they think they can get that through that sort of different route.
So I think that is a really important point. Anecdotally, in different parts of the country, I hear from people saying that when jobs are being designed, the NHS is quite, it's not the easiest place to negotiate doing something part-time or on a job share basis or to be flexible. But as Stephen says, we are finding that generations are coming through who believe that that is actually a fundamental expectation of the workplace. And we need to get better at that and to really challenge ourselves to say, just because it's always been like this, should it always be like it? And, you know, if we could crack, particularly some of our clinician levels of recruitment, being able to put together offers which are attractive and which differentiate us, maybe we might be a bit more confident that these things can be made to work. And certainly in previous lives, I've worked very closely with job share arrangements. And actually the amount of value you get out of people who feel that they're being supported to work flexibly, and the cover that you get, it's tremendous. So I think that challenge, Rick, which stems out of part of what you've asked, is something that we should be meeting and greeting positively and seeing what we can do to encourage it. Can we move on, if that's all right with everybody? Lauren, thank you. Message landed. I think you will notice we're all taking this extraordinarily seriously and do want to see CPFT get to a better position on money. I'm going to go to you, Lauren, and also to Mike, because the period that is covered by this annual report on audit committee effectiveness does actually cover the period that Mike was chairing it, as opposed to Brian. Not to say that Brian wouldn't speak about it, but very kindly he said it should be for you and Lauren to take it. So Lauren, do you want to start, and then perhaps Mike can speak to anything that he wants to add?
Yeah, so I thought more with Mike, as I didn't attend any of the committee during this
period. Well, that is indeed true. Well, let me start with Mike then.
This report is a formal subcommittee report to the report that has to be done annually. We're talking about 22-23, and in that there is much that happened in 21-22, since it includes the final opinions. We achieved assurance, which we've had for many years on our internal audit. We achieved a clean bill of health and unqualified set of annual accounts. We were late, and subsequent to that lateness, our auditors at that time, BDO, decided that NHS audits in this part of the world were not for them. And we appointed successfully the new Lord Azes, who next year reported on time and without qualification. Other than that, I'll take any questions.
Lauren, is there anything you want to add at all? I mean, it's a good report as these things go.
Yeah, I guess that was the point I was going to draw out. It's a positive report. You know, it was a good account of the work for the year, and just also note that internal audit undertook six full reports and 4 assurance activities for us. So a robust year of work, both from internal audit through to the accounts, managing the risk, and then the, as Mike notes, the sort of highest level of assurance we can have, which is an unqualified set of accounts.
Brilliant. Well, it is good to have good news on that front. So Mike, thank you for the sterling chairmanship you did. The baton was passed to Brian. So no pressure there, but
I'd like to attend as a member of the public next year when you present.
Appreciate your support.
Can we move now to an item very dear to my heart, very important actually to our organisation, those we serve, and to our staff in terms of the impact that it has. And I'm going to invite Ed to open this. It's formally we're being asked as a board to sign off the accounts for Head to Toe, which is our charity, of which we are all trustees. But I think I'd invite Ed to preface it by talking a little bit about the work of Head to Toe and the strategy for Head to Toe.
Yeah. So, well, people will know Head to Toe is our charity. It's a small charity. We spend what we do partly on staff support, partly on improved patient wellbeing. Last year, as Lauren will comment in a little bit more detail, was a good year for us in terms of income, but we need to up our game further still, where our income is running below our costs at the moment. That's not an immediate crisis because we have best part of 400k in reserves. So we are not, there's no immediate crisis, but we do need to think about how we really lift the profile of the charity and we find additional income streams. So there's some strategic work going on with charity manager and her team. And I think we have a board development day in February, which will give us an opportunity to really look a little bit deeper at how we can best use the charity. I do think it's important. And the last thing I'd say before passing off to Lauren, some of the things that cropped up in the discussion today, the difference that apparently trivial spend on the quality of staff space can make to the sense of feeling valued by the organisation is one theme I would echo, having gone through a number of inpatient units. Often the staff space is really cramped and quite difficult to imagine staff, using it recreationally to recover from, let's say, a difficult episode on the ward or whatever. I think there are a number of ways where a relatively small amount of money judiciously sprinkled across the system could make quite a big difference to how the place feels for both staff and service users. And I think that thing about the value of the staff experience is particularly important given all the recruitment issues that we've been discussing. So I'm very excited to be part of it, and I think the strategic review that we're going to undertake in the next few weeks is going to be very, very important for setting a future direction.
Brilliant, thank you, Ed. Lauren, do you want to come in on this?
Thank you. So mindful we are not just here as a board of directors today, but in our capacity as the corporate trustee when we're taking this item for Head to Toe. So we're here to look at the accounts that are prepared under the Charities Act 2011 and Charity Regulations 2008. And to assess whether they give a true and fair view of the financial position of the funds held. I think it highlights some really key points. It was actually a good year in terms of income generation for the charity. So 171,000 raised from grants, fundraising, investment income, corporate, individual donations, memory donations and giving. That's up from 103,000 in the previous year. So there is a positive trajectory there, and that's one that hopefully we can continue upon. But what we also saw in the year just gone was 297,000 of expenditure. So we've spent another 100,000 beyond what we spent in previous years. Now, whilst that's brilliant and has enabled us to do things like the Wingman bus, support the Children's Hospital campaign, the Snuglet at Springbank, what it does mean is that if we want to continue to invest in our services at that rate, we will need to push harder on the income, because the net movement was a decrease in funds of 126,000. That said, as at the point of the accounts, which is at the 31st of March, last year, so they're going through the audit process now. We still had 481,000 remaining in funds, of which 87,000 was restricted to specific use, and the majority was unrestricted funds. So there is a lot there still to work with. There's a lot of great things that we can do with the charity, and so we bring them here today for recommending for sign off as a set of accounts. And a note, and it's within the body report, but just to highlight, they've been independently examined by ASET, who are also the trust auditors that were just referenced, and they've advised that, obviously subject to today, they intend to issue an unqualified opinion on the accounts.
Thank you, Lauren. So I'm looking around the room to fellow trustees, just to ensure that everybody's in agreement. Yeah. Fantastic. I think we should take a moment to thank Hannah and the team for the hard work that they do, their commitment to head to toe and through that to CPFT and those that it serves is astonishing in terms of the just the level of commitment they give, the professionalism they bring, the good cheer which they bring to places which are often feeling a little bit tricky. The last time I was with Hannah, she was bringing Christmas presents to staff who were unlikely to be in receipt of any gifts, who are inpatients. And that's, you know, that's somebody really giving time and thought to how it feels to be in receipt of our services at what can often feel like quite a lonely time. So a small vignette as to what they do. It is interesting, given that mental health is now much more talked about, mental ill health much more talked about, and seen as much more important, that relatively speaking, it's harder to attract funding interest into charitable activities around mental ill health. I contrast that with the way in which Children's Hospital is absolutely flying through the air in terms of donations it's attracting. But we need to be confident that mental ill health is part of the national discourse now, and our charity is a way of actually doing something very practical that sits outside what we as an NHS trust can directly do, and to be individually and collectively committed to its success. So the work we're doing on strategic future for the charity, really important, but inviting everybody here in this room and beyond to think about how can we individually and collectively support head to toe, and certainly part of my New Year's resolution is to go through the process of doing payroll giving into head to toe every month. Everybody can support differently, but it's a way of showing that actually this matters because we recognise the impact it has. So I'll stop on head to toe now, but so important. Did you want to come back in?
Yeah, just to pick up on what you said about the rated salience of mental health, which I completely agree with, and Cambridge Children's, I mean, Kathy can comment on this, but a lot of the fundraising success there has come from articulating that Cambridge Children's will be a joined up service for physical and mental health. That's the biggest, that's the most resonant strapline actually with potential donors. And I think one thing I would hope we'll see is head to toe learning from Addenbrooke's Charitable Trust, which is a much bigger, more established organisation, how to cultivate the big donors and really articulate a positive case about mental health, because you know it works, doesn't it?
No, I agree. I think there's huge potential, and actually it's a fairly, you know, there aren't many mental health trusts who are running charities, so I do think that there is huge potential to tap in. It's how we present it.
And to go back to where we started the day, the conversations we have with employers, for employers with mental health is much more part of what boards in different places are talking about. If we could play in some of those who are in our vibrant area of employment, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, have them thinking about how they could partner with us, wouldn't that be fabulous, in terms of head to toe. So thank you there again to everybody who works there. We always have now the most exciting part of the meeting, which is where we give a report on the use of the trust seal. And Caroline, we're reporting this month that
Nil activity.
Nil activity.
When is the trust seal wheeled out?
It has been wheeled out. Blow the dust off. Yes, so it's to seal any approval documents for leases of buildings, any changes to contracts of building, tenancy agreements, usually signed by the Chief Finance Officer and the Chief Executive.
Excellent. Next time I'm doing it, I'll invite you along it.
It's quite a ceremony.
Yeah. We do? Yes, it's involved. Sorry, too much levity here in Tilbourne, but I think it's the start of the day that's made us all slightly lose the plot. Can I move there? We've just got a couple of moments. If there are any questions from any of our governors who are with us today. Not compulsory by any means. And then any questions from members of the public? In which case, can I say thank you so much for bearing with us in terms of having to move the agenda around a little bit today. We got through. and thank you to everybody who's made a contribution. We'll come back together again in public on the 27th of March, which I think is just before the Easter break. The year is running away from us. So thank you so much, and thank you to Emily, who's been running the slides, running the meeting. Thank you, Emily. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank
you.
Thank you.